Do you like to receive messages? You might receive a message on the telephone. You can receive text messages and emails. A very long time ago, some people also used to use pigeons to deliver messages. My favourite type of message to receive is a letter in the post. Now, I don't mean one of those letters that sometimes come in brown envelopes, because usually those are bills. But I love to receive letters in the post from friends who have a message for me. I've got a message with me today. Would you like to see what's inside? It looks pretty important, but I'm afraid we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. The end of our last episode was very, very sad. God's people were taken away from the beautiful land that God had given them. They were taken to a faraway land called Babylon. But even though they were far from home, God still spoke to them. He didn't speak to them on the telephone or by text message or by email or even by letter. He sent special messengers called prophets to bring special messages to his people. One of the messengers was called Ezekiel. Let's see what message God gave the people through Ezekiel. The message says God will raise up the temple again and give his people clean hearts. The beautiful temple had been destroyed, but God promised that one day it would be raised up again and he would give his people clean hearts. Another prophet was called Isaiah. Let's see what message Isaiah brought to the people. Wow. Through Isaiah, God reminded the people that his forever king would come from King David's family. And there was another prophet called Jeremiah. Let's see what message Jeremiah brought to the people. Jeremiah told the people that Israel, the people of Israel, God's people, would return home in 70 years. God's people were going home again, but they were going to have to wait. These messages from the prophets were all written down in God's special book. We can read these messages for ourselves in the Bible. When God's people were in Babylon, there was a man named Daniel. You may have heard about Daniel because there are lots and lots of stories in the Bible about him. There were many times in Daniel's life when he could have said, I give up. I'm not following God anymore. It's just too difficult. But Daniel followed God, even when it seemed like nobody else was following God, because Daniel knew that God was with him and that God would never, ever leave him. Daniel made God number one in his life. Daniel talked to God many, many times each day. And when he was told that he had to stop, that he shouldn't talk to God anymore, he didn't listen, because God was number one in his life. And Daniel knew that God hears and answers the prayers of his children. Daniel was thrown into a den of lions. Now, I don't mean soft, cuddly lions like this guy. I mean big, scary lions with big, scary teeth and hungry tummies. Do you think God left Daniel? No. God was right there with Daniel, and God closed the mouths of the lions and kept Daniel safe. Wow. God is amazing. Nothing is impossible for him. God's special messenger, Jeremiah, had told the people that God promised that after 70 years they would return home again. And when 70 years had passed, Daniel prayed and asked God to remember his promise. Do you think God kept his promise? Yes. The people of Israel returned home to Jerusalem. They celebrated. They said, God is good. His love never ends. It lasts forever. They rebuilt the temple, just as God said would happen. But the people were still waiting. What were they waiting for? They were waiting for God's forever king to come to rescue his people from sin forever. Then something unusual happened. Or maybe I should say nothing happened. Because there were no more messages from God. Nothing. Not for 1 day, or 1 month, or 1 year, or 10 years, or 100 years, but 400 years. 400 years of silence. Other nations got bigger and bigger and bigger. The kings from other nations ruled over God's people. What on earth was going on? Now, I told you that I had a message that I was going to show you. Let's see where that message is. Do you think we should have a look and see what's going on? Now, I'll untie my ribbon. This is an unusual message. It says, everyone is to go to his hometown to be counted. Signed, Caesar Augustus. Caesar Augustus was a very, very important ruler, but he wanted everyone to know how important he was, and he thought he would do this by counting all of the people. But he didn't know that someone far greater was coming. God's forever king was on his way. Come back next week to find out what happens next.